Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going, and as I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. Many of you have emailed me about the question of the destruction of the East Wing of the White House. I want to comment on that, among other things, this morning. In my library, I have a copy of the White House Guide, originally prepared by Jacqueline Kennedy, but issued by every White House since. The copy that I have is quite historic. It is signed by 3 presidents and 7 first ladies. And the major point of the White House Guide is to let people know how important the People's House is to all of us. We now know that last week, the president ordered the destruction of the East Wing of the White House. Now, I have discussed this in the past, but I want to emphasize the fact that anybody who has ever been on a tour of the White House has entered through the East Wing. It no longer exists. And by the way, that means there are no White House tours these days. There's no way to enter the White House. Just want to point that out. The people cannot enter the people's house. But I want to say a word about what the president envisions. He envisions not only this massive ballroom, but he also envisions a triumphal arch that will cover the skies of Washington, D.C. Okay, I'm exaggerating slightly, but no doubt about it, it would be a substantial change to the way in which we view our nation's capital. Let's be clear. Yesterday, the President of the United States of America made an announcement, and that is that the Fine Arts Committee, made up of 6 members, have all been dismissed by the President. Why? I'm not sure the Fine Arts Committee would have any say over anything, but the President wants the approval of a committee so he can get away from the idea that he's been acting unilaterally. And that means he has to have 6 people on that committee who agree with him and his vision of Washington. This is not new. The president replaces people all the time. Indeed, in the midst of this crisis taking place in the weather in the Caribbean, we know that the president has essentially gutted FEMA. There are innumerable situations where the president has taken this kind of action. But I want to be crystal clear. I want there to be no ambiguity. There has to be a limit on presidential power. Let me continue this general thesis by talking about what is now happening in terms of the president's trip to the Far East. He is concluding agreements. They're not treaties, because remember, technically treaties have to be presented to the United States Senate. These are agreements which he will sign and the leaders of various nations will sign. And again, the power of checking what the president can or cannot do has been removed. And by the way, this is not new with Donald Trump. Other presidents have done the same thing. You will remember in the original agreement on the question of Iran and limiting its nuclear capability, it was not agreed to by 2/3 of the Senate because it wasn't viewed as a treaty. And so it was implemented with a small group of senators agreeing with the president and no Senate action that mattered. I'm pointing this out because there is something seriously wrong, and we have to understand it. Now, there's something else that bothered me this morning. You may have heard that former President Joe Biden gave a major speech, the first one since his cancer treatment. And he warned of the dark days ahead here in the United States because of these kinds of unilateral actions. And President Biden said he still had faith. We have to have faith in the American system, and I do. But then the Republicans in Congress, mind you, Congress is on recess. The House is not meeting. But members of the committee in the House of Representatives investigating the use of auto pens, is now directly challenging Joe Biden, his pardons, and other actions which he took when he chose to have the auto pen sign. And the reason, he said, was because so many requests were being made for his signature on so many documents. It's not illegal to have a machine sign the president's name. We've seen it happen before. I have a whole book on President Kennedy's use of auto pens, and that goes back to the early 1960s. But there is a concerted effort to discredit Joe Biden, to discredit his pardons. And I want to remind you, the major pardons that he gave were to his whole family. And why? Because of the threat of retribution, that if they were not pardoned, Donald Trump's Justice Department would have hauled them in and filed charges. Let me be clear, I had this discussion with a dear friend who assured me there would be no retribution if Trump were reelected as president. Well, take a look at where we are now. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And I want to say a word about a third term. Donald Trump has basically dismissed the idea of a third term. He's also dismissed the idea of being nominated for vice president and running on a ticket presumably led by J.D. Vance. He said he didn't think that would fly. But it is important to note that the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Speaker Johnson, made a statement today that was fascinating. He said that the Constitution rules out the opportunity for a president to seek a third term. He's right. And if Donald Trump really took the oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the United States, all he has to do is open it up and take a look at the 22nd Amendment. And yet, the president's continued actions should cause us all deep concern. It is a deep disregard for the American system. There is another matter which we need to discuss briefly this morning, and that is the Israeli decision to hit in Gaza against Hamas. Hamas was responsible for the death of an Israeli soldier and has been violating the truce repeatedly. Now, the Israelis hit, and they hit hard. And today, a statement was made by the Israelis, okay, we've done what we have to do now. Let's return to the ceasefire. I suggested to you when this whole thing came down that it was not a peace agreement. It most assuredly is not. And as for a ceasefire, I have never believed that the ceasefire will hold. I say this having studied the Middle East for many years and having understood clearly the intention of Hamas and, yes, the Palestinian Authority. Their goal is the ultimate destruction of Israel. Period. There is a real question now about whether or not this so-called peace deal will hold. I don't believe that it will. And I'm going on record with you right now in saying that the only real issue is the recognition by Hamas, by the Palestinian Authority, by all of those involved, that Israel has a right to exist in peace and security. These are real issues. And let me again return to the theme that it really depends on the President of the United States. The founders invested tremendous powers in the president, but with the idea that there would be a check and a balance. Donald Trump seems not to regard a check or a balance as something that he is bound by. And that should disturb each and every one of us. The President of the United States has extraordinary ability for good and, yes, for evil. I am not accusing this president of evil, but I am saying that this president's complete disregard for the norms of government are clear. I began with a brief comment about the fact that he has now fired the 6 members of the Fine Arts Committee. He wants to do what he wants to do in Washington. Where are the Republicans in Congress? Can you imagine if Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or Joe Biden had ordered the kinds of moves that Donald Trump is ordering now? There would be outrage, and there should be outrage. Don't you agree? Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am John Rothman. Make sure to follow along. Let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which is, of course, our goal. I appreciate all of your comments on Facebook, on LinkedIn, my personal email, wherever you reach out to me. I do listen and I do read your comments. And I want to say a special word of thanks to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast. Without Gogo, well, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So Gogo, thanks so much. And to all of you, I will be back tomorrow with another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you then.